Hi everyone, I'm very excited to share with you our research on supporting families have better discussions about digital privacy through perspective-taking activities. I would like to start with a typical after-dinner conversations you might recognize. After dinner, many families may chat about online activities and privacy, especially when kids start to use online social media like Instagram. Parents would usually warn their kids saying that, once you post something online, it's almost impossible to delete later. And some teenagers be like, oh, come on, relax. Nobody really cares about me anyway. Does this kind of conversation sound familiar to you? I believe that some of you might be nodding your heads right now. So, conversation like this tend to stall because both sides actually talk past each other and misunderstand each other's perspectives. Previous research has classified common issues in family privacy talks, like conversations becoming parent-led lectures on conversations that end without clear outcomes. So as privacy educators, we really want to help families overcome these issues. But to design effective interventions, we realize that we first need to closely observe what actually happens during these discussions. Without knowing the moment-to-moment dynamics, we don't know when to step in and how do we step in. Also, whether such interventions would work. And this is what the paper explored. To address this research problem, we created structured activities specifically designed around perspective-taking theory. And our goal was to help families better understand each other's views on digital privacy. Due to time constraints, I won't be able to go into the details here, but just let me give you a quick overview of who we worked with and why. We focused on teenagers in middle school, ages from 13 to 15, since this is typically when they first start using social media actively. It's also a critical period when teenagers are forming their privacy mental models together with their parents. We designed 4 structured sessions to help them achieve shared understanding about digital privacy. And here's a real exchange from our study. Before the moderator intervened, a parent and child were discussing how not to share the child's mental health treatment experiences on Instagram. The parent said, putting anything down is always a risk. The child replied in a somewhat frustrated tone, How would they know I'll be the same person at 25? Say, as I was like, 10 or 11. Well, even without deep analysis, if we were just sit next to them, we can probably already sense something's wrong there. But to help improve this conversation, sensing something's wrong is far from enough. So we designed a framework to help us pinpoint multiple conversational patterns that disrupt the flow and effectiveness of the privacy dialogue. So, for example here, there are actually 2 conversation limitations. First, using absolute statements such as saying that there's always a risk. Second, the abstract expressions about vague future fears. It's a combination of issues that make it for both sides to talk past each other. So, any effective intervention needs to address all of these issues in a coordinated way, and this is quite challenging for real-time facilitation. To tackle these limitations, we designed a facilitation framework grounded in perspective-taking theory, and we adapted it specifically for family privacy discussions. Our approach involves 3 key elements. First, we support communication adaptability by carefully structuring turn-taking and reflection prompts. The second and the third elements were also inspired by the 5 Ds of privacy literacy educational framework. We enhance digital privacy literacy by encouraging families to see privacy as non-binary and context-dependent decisions. And to facilitate context-based discussions, we use realistic scenario prompts to help them ground privacy conversations in concrete situations. And here's how we apply this approach to the previous example. The moderator first asked the teenager to step back and clearly distinguish basic versus more personal information. Then, we encourage the parent to stop using absolute terms and instead discuss specific examples to contextualize the risks. As a result, the child clarified her thoughts, saying that I wouldn't mind sharing basic stuff, but more personal information's not so much. Notice how this language now reflects that sharing information actually depends on the information types. The parent also reflected this change, responding that same here, but I think it depends on timing and the situation too. And from here, the conversation became more focused and context-based, aligning both perspectives in a productive way. And you can check out the paper to see how their conversation evolved later on. Seeing these positive results, we're now considering how to scale our perspective-taking facilitation to help thousands of families. To do this, we propose embedding structured turn-taking and contextual prompts into automated tools, potentially using AI assistance balanced by expert oversight. Of course, scaling brings significant challenges. For instance, how do we maintain emotional nuance and context sensitivity when automating these facilitations? And how effective are these interventions over the long term across the repeated family conversations? Because we gotta remember that families are going to talk about digital privacy issues over and over again. So we need you to join us to tackle these challenges together. In closing, I would like to thank my co-authors Lanjing Liu and Professor Yaxin Yao, as well as acknowledge support from NSF, Google, and Meta. Thank you for listening.